What's happening, everybody? Justin, Bridgewater's finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, fueled as always by the great folks at Nerd Tees, and with San Jose's decisive Game 7 victory last night over Nathan McKinnon and the Colorado Avalanche. I wanted McKinnon to get to the West Final, but didn't quite happen. With that victory, the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs come to an incredible close, and since there is no rest for the weary, welcome to the Eastern and Western Conference final predictions for the 2019 NHL Stanley Cup playoffs. And so far in these playoffs, I think if it's proven anything, it's that there's nothing like playoff hockey. I say that full well realizing exactly what Kawhi Leonard is doing for the Toronto Raptors right now, having a playoff for the ages. With all due respect to everything that Kawhi is doing, you can't step to the Stanley Cup playoffs, man. The playoffs continue to be a real feast or famine for yours truly. Went even money in the second round, 2-2. Did correctly predict the Eastern Conference final of Boston versus Carolina. The give back there being I didn't get either of the teams in the West. So going 2-2 in the second round means I'm 5-7 for the playoffs. In order to be over 500, you boys got to be perfect. What's the big deal in that? Though I should have known better. I should have picked San Jose because I picked San Jose correctly in the first round, and I should have just stuck with them like I did with Boston and Carolina. But hey, perfection is the only option, so we're going to waste no more time. Let's get started. We're going to go into the Eastern Conference first. The Atlantic Division number 2, Boston Bruins, taking on the upstarts, the bunch of jerks, Eastern Conference wildcard number 1, Carolina. Season series here was 2-1 in favor of the Boston Bruins, but scoring in those games was tied at 10 goals apiece, about as even as you can be. Brad Marchand, basically public enemy number 1 across the NHL right now, continues to take his trend of leading scoring for the Boston Bruins in the regular season into the playoffs. He's still the leading scorer for Boston in this postseason. 5 goals, 8 helpers for 13 points, coming off that 100-point regular season. Again, we talked about how good of a regular season Sebastian Aho had for the Carolina Hurricanes. Jacob Slavin continues to lead scoring for Carolina in these playoffs. Hasn't found the back of the net yet, but 11 helpers has him, I believe, number 2 in playoff assists behind only Erik Karlsson, and that's a good number to be behind. The gaps in goal differential per game and shot differential per game have basically carried over the difference from what they were in the regular season. Regular season, Boston plus 0.54 goals per game to Carolina just 0.26. In these playoffs, Boston nearly a full goal per game higher than the opposition at 0.93. Carolina no slouches at 0.82. So both obviously very well on the happy side of par. Boston still with that edge. And shot differential per game, same deal, but it's on the Carolina side. Again, Carolina, the analytics darlings. I said that right at the top of the first video of the first round predictions. I was like, Carolina is the analytics fans' pick in these playoffs. And look what they've done. Carolina plus 5.8 shots per game in the regular season. Boston plus 3.2. So look, both obviously doing very well at generating more shots than they're allowing. And again, it's carried over into the postseason. Carolina plus 3.4 shots per game. Boston plus 2.2. So basically, the regular season in these terms, the consistency there has carried over into the postseason for both of these teams in both of those regards. Boston, slight edge in goal scoring. Carolina, slight edge in shot generation. The Boston Bruins still sport the number 1 power play in these playoffs, 28.6%, and that is basically almost a full 3 points higher than what their regular season power play percentage was. But it's just another way of saying this really good power play is still really good. Carolina lagging behind in the penalty kill, only 75% in these playoffs. That is number 13 out of the 16 teams that made it. That's not going to be good enough if Carolina starts finding themselves in a bit of a dogfight, in a little bit of penalty trouble. Boston is going to make them pay. But I can't necessarily say that the same is true on the opposite side. You've got Carolina only a 10.5% power play. Not the worst in the playoffs, but it is number 14, which is really, really, really not good enough. And Boston's penalty kill, they've been pretty darn good, 83.8%. It's number 6 in these playoffs. That's basically carried over from the regular season. Actually, it's improved from the regular season by a couple of percentage points. So special teams, it could be a determiner in this series. In general, these two teams don't take a ton of penalties, haven't taken a ton of penalties, I should say, in these playoffs. Boston's only taken 38, and I'm sure that makes Leafs fans absolutely vomit. Carolina's taken 41 in terms of penalty minutes, 76 for Boston, 93 for Carolina. All the same, it is something that Carolina's got to watch out for, because the second they go down a man, they know that perfection line's coming over the boards. We're going to talk goaltenders in a second, and obviously in this series, that's all the more important because we're not 100% sure which one's going to be for one team. But before we did that, I wanted to take a look at how teams have performed at home and on the road just so far in these playoffs, because there's a pretty big dichotomy with certainly a couple of these teams between performances depending on where they are. Obviously, since Boston has home ice advantage in this series, we're going to start with Boston at home and Carolina on the road. Boston's been pretty average at home. They've won 4 of their 7 games on home ice so far these playoffs. They've outscored opponents 20-16. On the other side, Carolina is exactly even money. They've won 3 of their 6 games away from home, but the scoring has been an issue. They've been outscored in those 6 games 18-12. It's an average of 3-2 per game. So even though they've won 3 of those games, a couple that they've lost, they haven't been pretty. But move this series to Carolina at home and Boston on the road, that's where things get really interesting. Carolina has not lost yet in these playoffs on home ice. They beat Washington 3 times. They beat the Islanders twice. 5-0 in these playoffs. They've outscored opponents 22-7 on home ice. Carolina's played lights out in their own building. Boston's been no slouch away from Boston in these playoffs either. They've won 4 of the 6 games they've played away from home. They've outscored opponents 20-12. So the scoring has been absolutely balanced. The defense does get a little better away from home. Basically, I think this series is going to be determined in Carolina. Now we will get to talk about the goaltenders. Tuukka Rask, there's been no question about Tuukka Rask so far in these playoffs. Maybe looked a little wonky a time or two in the Toronto series, but since then, Tuukka Rask, in my opinion, has been lights out. Arguably the best goaltender left in these playoffs. Tuukka Rask has stopped 408 of 435 shots. Goals against average just barely over 2 at 2.02, sporting a .938 save percentage, facing about 33 shots a game. Especially in that second round series, Tuukka Rask turned it on, man, and he is playing some of the best hockey I've ever seen him play. And the real question is, who is going to be the goaltender for the Carolina Hurricanes? That's the $1 million question. Game 1 is tonight, and we still don't know who the number 1 goaltender is going to be for the Hurricanes. Peter Mrazek looks like he's ready to come back. He's had an all right playoff. Stopped 210 of 230 shots. It's a 2.22 goals against average and a .913 save percentage. But when he got injured, when he had to be relieved by Curtis McIlhenny, pretty good backup, ain't he? Shout out Steve Dangle. Curtis McIlhenny's been incredible. He stopped 71 of 75 shots. It's a .156 goals against average and a .947. If it's me, and I'm not Rod Brindamore, obviously, if I was Rod Brindamore, I would have a lot more money. I'm not Rod Brindamore. I don't have to make this decision. It's not easy. I think he said he was going to get up yesterday morning and make the decision, and I think his quote was, "It's not a 10-second decision." They really, really got to think about this. If it's me, I don't think I can justify to myself taking Curtis McIlhenny out of the net. Not with what he did. 71 saves on 75 shots. It's unreal. I can't take McIlhenny out of the net when all he's done in the games that I've asked him to play in the playoffs is put up a .947. I can't take him out of the net. But again, this is a dangerous game. If you don't give Mrazek back the net, now that he's healthy enough to play, you put McIlhenny out there, McIlhenny gets shelled game 1 or game 2. You think, okay, maybe this was a mistake. Maybe I go back to Mrazek. Now all of a sudden, McIlhenny's confidence, even though he's a backup goaltender and he understands the game, his confidence can't help but be hurt. Mrazek's confidence is already a little bit bruised because you didn't put him back in the net right away when he was ready. What happens if Mrazek gets shelled? Which, look, at the end of the first round, Mrazek had an .899 save percentage. It's not like Mrazek can't get shelled, because he certainly can. So if he does, then what do? Do you go back to McIlhenny, and now all of a sudden this is a gigantic mess? So Rod Brind'Amour does not have an easy job here. Not in the least. McIlhenny would be my starting goaltender tonight in Game 1. We'll have to see what happens. What do you think? Who do you think it should be? McIlhenny or Mrazek? Let me know. I said it a little bit earlier. I think the play in Carolina specifically is going to be what really determines this series. Look, the goaltending decision on Carolina's side certainly is going to play, I think, a huge factor in how long this series goes, maybe even who wins it. I think that's a big decision. But the way the teams play in Carolina, one way or the other, whichever team is able to hold the play in Carolina, I think has the edge in the series. And I think it's Boston. There is no substitute for experience. There ain't no app for that. You got this team, this Boston Bruins team, this core has been here before, has done this before, has already faced a game set. Well, actually, sorry, every team so far has faced a game 7, but this is just a team that to me is more battle tested, and I gotta take Rask and the way he's playing right now. I got to take that. Official prediction, Bruins, Carolina Hurricanes. I am going to take the Boston Bruins, and I think Boston wins this series in Game 6 in Carolina. I think that really hammers home the whoever holds the play in Carolina is going to win this series. That's where I think Boston does it. I think they beat Carolina in Carolina, and what a season for the Hurricanes. All right. Western Conference Final. Pacific Division number 2, San Jose Sharks playing host in this series to the number 3 team from the Central Division, those being the St. Louis Blues. Season series here, once again, about as close as you can get, although 2 of the 3 games were 4-0 shutout blowouts, and each team got one, so I guess that means it was still pretty close. Season series was 2-1 for the Sharks, scoring in the season series 7-6. So you're talking about 4-0, 4-0, and then a 3-2 win. So pretty darn close season series, despite the fact that 2 of those games, not so much. For the Sharks, Logan Couture and Tomas Hertl currently tied for playoff scoring lead in these playoffs. 9 goals, 5 helpers, 14 points. You gotta like when 2 of your players co-lead for the playoff scoring race. That's certainly a good position to be in. Brent Burns obviously led the Sharks in the regular season, 83 points. Pretty darn good for somebody on the back end. Ryan O'Reilly, St. Louis's leading scorer from the regular season, but Jaden Schwartz, 8 goals and 11 points so far in these playoffs. Schwartz has been coming up big for the Blues since the playoffs began. He leads the way for St. Louis. Now here's where we start to see a little bit of a difference from the regular season into the playoffs. In the regular season, San Jose held the edge both in terms of goal differential per game and shot differential per game. Goal differential was 0.37 to 0.3, so it's not really measurable, certainly not a certainty, like they're very comparable in that sense. Shot differential, a little more certain. Plus 4.7 for San Jose, plus 3.2 for St. Louis. So you can definitely say San Jose better at generating shots in the regular season. However, in these playoffs, San Jose, for all the goals that they've scored, have given up the exact same amount. So their goal differential per game is exactly that. Not a negative, but not exactly a positive. St. Louis averaging an extra 0.08 goals per game. They've scored, I believe, 1 more goal in these playoffs than they have allowed. So not really a certainty either way. On the offensive side of things, in that context anyway, this series is basically even. The real big difference is the shot generation. St. Louis generating an extra 3 shots per game so far on these playoffs. I think it's like 32.9 to 29.9 or some. It's somewhere in that range, but it's an extra 3 shots per game. San Jose is only managing an extra half a shot per game, an extra shot every 2 games. So you're looking at a situation here where that's the real measurable difference so far in these playoffs between these two teams. It's in terms of St. Louis generating more shots. Both of these teams have seen their power play percentages dip by multiple percentage points from the regular season. San Jose's gone from a 23.6 to an 18.5. St. Louis has gone from a 21.1 to a 17.1. Those only rank number 10 and number 11 in terms of power plays so far in these playoffs. San Jose does have the slight edge in the penalty kill, an 80.8% penalty kill. It's still only number 9 in these playoffs. St. Louis has really struggled, 75% on the penalty kill. What is really important here, especially for that San Jose penalty kill number, is the fact that San Jose is taking way too many penalties. 63 penalties so far in these playoffs, 157 penalty minutes so far in these playoffs. Both of those lead the Stanley Cup playoffs. So discipline has been an issue for San Jose, taking altogether way too many penalties, especially when you look at playing a St. Louis team that's only taken 37 penalties, 76 penalty minutes. I say all that to say this: St. Louis has been relatively disciplined. San Jose has been relatively not. So that penalty kill, which is average in these playoffs, 80.8%, is going to be put to the task if San Jose can't figure out how to play more disciplined. In as much as I think the Boston-Carolina series is going to be determined by play in Carolina, I think this series is going to be determined by play in San Jose. San Jose 6-2 at home so far in these playoffs with an astronomical 53 goals scored in 8 games. It's unreal. Scoring is 31-22 in favor of San Jose in those games. So yeah, San Jose scoring more goals, but holy crap, when the game's played in San Jose, things get a little nuts. St. Louis, to their credit, 5-1 on the road so far in these playoffs. They've been real road warriors so far, but the scoring's pretty even. It's 19-14, which is basically, it's almost the minimum if you win 5 of 6 games and win them all by 1 goal. So their road games have been very, very tight, but San Jose's home games have been pretty run and gun. Move the series to St. Louis and you actually find the place where both of these teams have struggled the most. St. Louis under 500 at home so far in these playoffs, 3-4, being only outscored 16-18, but still they've lost more games on home ice than they've won. And at this point in the season, that's got to adjust the collar a little bit on that one if you're part of the Blues fan base. The Sharks on the road haven't been very good. 2 of their 6 games is all that they have won so far in these playoffs. They've been outscored 21-12. So while the defense doesn't exactly improve, the offense kind of shrivels up a little bit. Now the goaltenders, and this is a tremendously interesting goaltending matchup to me. Martin Jones for San Jose versus Jordan Binnington for St. Louis. Martin Jones hasn't exactly been fantastic in these playoffs. 363 saves on 399 shots. It's a 272 goals against average and only a 910 save percentage, facing about 29 shots a game. So those numbers are fine, but they're not exactly what I would call good numbers. Jordan Binnington's numbers look better. 346 saves on 378 shots. It's a 239 goals against and a 915 save percentage, also facing about 29 shots a game. So if you just look at the bulk numbers and you say, which of these 2 goaltenders would you rather have? 99% of people are probably going to say Jordan Binnington. Here's my thing, and I've been critical of Jordan Binnington. I've been critical of him on Twitter. I've been critical of him in these videos. The only time in this playoff that I have seen Jordan Binnington play consistently well is the back half of that Dallas series. Full marks to him. He closed out that series in the last, I would say, 2 games plus. He closed that series out, and he deserves full credit for that. But up to that point, he had a 2.8 goals against average and a 906 for the save percentage. I know I screen capped it on Twitter. It's on my Twitter account at @blockbuster_guy. You can go see it. I don't know that it's a slam dunk that I would rather have Jordan Binnington in this series than Martin Jones. In my opinion, I think the San Jose Sharks control their own fate here. You've got to play more disciplined. You've got to take fewer penalties. Your penalty kill has been okay in the context of these playoffs, but if you're giving up way too many opportunities, eventually a St. Louis team that does have good scoring forwards, Vladimir Tarasenko, hello, does have good scoring forwards, will eventually take advantage of that. So they've got to clean up the discipline. They can't be taking so many penalties. They have to hold serve at home. They're more than capable of doing that. They've won 6 of their 8 home games. I would like them to see maybe play a little bit less run and gun because, yeah, they're scoring a ton, but if that scoring even shrivels up a little bit, doesn't so much make up for what you're giving up on the other end. So I'd like to see them play a little bit tighter on home ice. And again, I'm just not seeing the consistency out of Jordan Binnington that I would like to see. I'm going to take Martin Jones, and I'm going to take the San Jose Sharks based on that. Official prediction, San Jose, St. Louis. I'm going to take the San Jose Sharks. I think for the 3rd consecutive series, the San Jose Sharks go to Game 7 on home ice, and I think they win the game. So I'm going to take San Jose in 7 games to beat St. Louis. Heck of a season for the Blues. I just think the Sharks kind of have that smell of a team of destiny on them. You know what I mean? So my prediction for your Stanley Cup final is the Boston Bruins, who defeat the Carolina Hurricanes in 6 games, and the San Jose Sharks, who defeat the St. Louis Blues in 7 games. And in all fairness, in the interest of transparency, I am also kind of playing the story. The story here is Joe Thornton returns to the Stanley Cup final for, I believe, the 3rd time, certainly 2nd time at least, but I'm pretty sure it's his 3rd time, or it would be his 3rd time going to the Stanley Cup final, and the team he would have to beat to win his 1st Stanley Cup, come on. Sports is poetry, folks. Live with it. There you go, folks. Eastern and Western Conference final predictions are in. That's it for me. Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, fueled as always by the incredible folks at NerdTees. What do you think? How do you think the Eastern and Western Conference finals are going to go? Toss your predictions in the comments below, and we will see you again for the Stanley Cup final.